Hi everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. In this video, we're going to talk about tensor rings, right? At Truly Holistic, I create and provide tensor ring technology, right? Tensor rings. And I want to quickly talk about, the original inventor of tensor rings was a gentleman called Slim Sperling. In the early 90s, he created the first tensor ring. And what he experienced was with metal, right? He's a blacksmith. He was brought up, that was his skill set. And he was working with copper wire, and he created a closed loop of copper wire, right? And so when he was also working with cubit measures from the Giza pyramids. And when he cut it to that specific measurement, which is a sacred measurement, a cubit, and when he braced it together, create a closed loop, he had friends that could see the energy, and what they saw was on, for example, if I took this tensor ring and again imagine it not twisted to begin with, his friends could see that on one end there was light energy coming out this end, but there was dark energy coming out this end. And of course, what that represents is duality, right? And what I really want to emphasize in this video is duality. And duality is what humanity is confined to. I quite often call it the game of duality. Many people, when they use the word, we're locked up in the matrix or prison world, that's what we're talking about. It's a confinement and limitation of what we are. Okay, is locking ourselves in duality. This is why, as a human with the mind steering our ship at a thought, at a mentality, we tend to compartmentalize things into, for example, good and bad, right? Which is duality, right? Opposing polarities. And that bleeds into many aspects in the way we perceive. For example, I was a nurse for 12 years working in a hospital setting. This is how they see microbes and how they go about treating microbes, right? They're either pathogenic or they're beneficial, which again, we're using a duality perspective, right? Where pathogen means that's a microbe that doesn't support the body, beneficial a microbe that then supports the body. And of course, at Truly Holistic, we've found that that's not what's actually going on with infections and microbes. It's just how we're perceiving it through the filtration of duality. And the problem about, as I said, the game of duality confines us to limitation, which means having an experience but not fully understanding or having a knowing of what it represents, right? That confines our level of understanding. So if we're trying to resolve health problems but with the filtration or filter of duality, we're not seeing the bigger picture. And hence, that's why we're a conventional medical system that just works on symptoms because they don't know the cause. Hence, they can't remedy the cause if you don't have a full understanding or knowing of what that problem is at its core, its origin. You can't resolve the cause. You can only work on the effect of the cause, which is then to essentially use as the main treatment option as medications to mitigate symptoms. And of course, there is a lack of knowing of what symptoms represent as well through the filter lens of duality. Anyway, coming back to the tensor ring, I just want you to really understand this. Now, when Slim all of a sudden decided to put the wire through a drill, right, and twist the wire, right, and then cut it to that specific measurement, and then brace it together into a closed loop, which created the first tensor ring, all of a sudden, his friends that could see the energy all of a sudden noticed that there was no dark side anymore. There was light coming out this end and light coming out this end. Now, this is known as neutrality. Okay, and neutrality means balance. Duality and living an existence of duality shifts you into an imbalanced state, right? And out of that imbalanced state, conflict, chaos, all these things come out of that, right? You look at blood pressure, what's that? Hypo blood pressure or hyper blood pressure. We're talking about polarities, right? Too high, too low. And what's the blood pressure we want to be? just right in the middle, right? Sounds like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? In regards to porridge hot, porridge cold, and just right. We're looking for that equilibrium. We're looking for that balance. Same thing with thyroid function, right? Hyper, hypo. We want to be in the middle, right? So it's this aspect of, as humanity, because we're looking through the lens of duality, we're using a discernment mode of mind, thought, mentality that locks us into that limitation, that confinement of playing the game of duality. We don't get to see the bigger picture. We don't get to have the understanding to then remedy the cause. Okay, this is why it's so important that we rise above duality into neutrality, which then allows us to see the bigger picture, where we can now see the cause then to the effect, the things we experience through the body, for example, symptoms. Right, so tensor rings are a must, right? This is why I make them. This is why they are so beneficial. I recommend them to my clients. It's because they are going to be an active role for you to shift things from an imbalanced state back into balance, right? Which is from duality to neutrality. So when you're using tensor rings, right, on the body or on water, on your food, we are bringing more of that consciousness of that very thing, which is the very thing that is required to bring it back into balance, right? Because everything in its original form is balanced. It's just when, for example, a microbe loses its ability to connect into what it authentically is, that it will shift into a pathogenic state, right? And then work against the very environment it exists within, right? Which is the microbes exist in your digestive system. And because the state or environment's not allowing that microbe to connect into what it truly is, right? It then works against its own environment, its host, that digestive system. Very much like a human, right? When we allow the mind, thought, mentality to guide us, which is not what we are, right? It's not presenting our natural state. It does not align with nature. It's then providing the seeds, the ideas for the human to create technology that then work against nature and destroy our environment. When we allow the mind and thought mentality to guide how we perceive and process our reality, to shift us away from what is instead of towards something which isn't, then we are sabotaging our state, which then is what causes illness. Okay, so this is very important. Now, if you really look at closely, right, at that twist of it, right, it's a vortex, right? It's a helical structure, a helical format. What do we know that's helical in its structure? DNA. Okay. Now the thing with DNA, right? DNA is made up of two strands that create a helical structure. That's a vortex, right? Now, a helix or a vortex is the formal geometry of flow, allows things movement, right? So in DNA, within that helical structure, we have nucleotides. That's simply the coding, right? So that helical structure, that vortex, is the carrier wave or flow that's carrying the coding, the energetics. Okay, because what we perceive on a human level as genetic is really energetics, because the original baseline or foundation of everything we perceive at a physical level, it's energy, it's frequency, right? So now that presents energetics. Now, when we get into gene expression, it's the intelligence or consciousness that's bound and connected to that energy, because energy is not just energy. Energy holds wisdom. It's an intelligence, it's a consciousness, right? So that intelligence or consciousness now becomes a smart device, so to speak, to allow what energetics, right, genetics, are expressed and what is not, right? That's the difference between a gene being expressed or being dormant. Right? Okay. So that then comes into knowing and understanding what you authentically are as an intelligence, as a consciousness, because as the human, right, the conflict is We are discerned through two different pathways: mind, thought, mentality, and heart, feel, knowing. And at Truly Holistic, we know one works for you and one doesn't. Right? One switches off and keeps a lot of your infinite potential, right? Genetics, energetics, dormant to keep you limited and confined within what we call the game of duality. And one of them enables you access to them, to realize why you're here and to express yourself in an expansive way, to walk in your light, to be empowered, to facilitate your infinite potential and capacity, right? These are what these tensor rings, especially at Truly Holistic with the energetics, the qubits that we use, are facilitating you. Infinite potential, infinite capacity. Okay? Because when we get up in the morning, right, do you have a chat? Do you have a clipboard and you chat with your white blood cells and talk about, hey, how are we going to go about the day? What are you going to do? No, you don't. But they are being directed at some level. And this is where we get into the game of intelligence and consciousness, right? If we are facilitating what we authentically are as a soul consciousness, which is not through mind, but through heart, right? Then that is going to guide all these physiological processes of the body to support you, not work against you. And of course, working against you, there's no better example of that, is an autoimmune condition where now the physiological processes of the body are now destroying your anatomy, right? The very thing that you're using as a vehicle to be here, right? Interesting stuff, right? So when we look at that, when we look at water, right? Water is the physical embodiment of flow. When you look at water flowing down the stream, it's not just going like that, it's vortexing. It's creating that helical structure, that vortex structure. Because a vortex has two forces, centrifugal force. One brings things into the middle of that substance, one pushes it out, right? And what we know, the role of those two different forces is that what that vortex means, it's keeping that substance clean and clear, which means it's providing a self-regulating, cleansing, detoxification process to itself as it goes about what it wants to do effortlessly. Okay? And the problem is at the moment, humanity believes they've got to, at an act of doing, provide that cleanse or detox. No, when you're doing that, that is a realization that your natural state has not been presented to begin with. Because if you're presenting your natural state, you would be accumulating stuff in the body that then requires a cleanse or detoxification protocol to be put in place. Okay? Because what happens is the pedal centrifugal forces, right? It's repelling and trying to purge out what it isn't, right? The stuff we want to get rid of. And it's bringing more of the light, the consciousness that it is, what it requires within itself, right? That's why those two forces are there. We see that with grounding earthing technology with the red blood cells, right? When somebody is not grounded or earthed, the red blood cells lose their negative ion charge. And what happens with, because there's only a few that still have that charge, the red blood cells that don't have the charge, they all jump on top of that one that has the charge because that's what they want. And they stack on top of each other like poker chips, which means thick, inflamed blood, which means illness. Now, when we go and ground and earth that person, right, 30 minutes later, take the blood sample, they look at the red blood cells. Every red blood cell is free floating now because they now all have that negative ion charge. Now, and what's happened is the spin rate of each red blood cell has increased, which means that it's enhanced its ability of centrifugal forces. It's repelling what it isn't to bring forth what it is, right? Which they call zeta potential in science in regards to that. It's directly connected to what these products facilitate and also what you provide when you provide your natural state. So I hope you really enjoyed this video. My explanation in regards to the development and evolution of the tensor ring, what these tensor rings can provide you from Truly Holistic, which are in a line with facilitating your natural state and not facilitating some outside force or outside energy. These are facilitating more of your energy, because when you are connected to your authenticity, when you open up your heart to present your natural state, You facilitate everything you are, and you provide everything the body ever required through one thing, just presenting your natural state. These products will help you get there to eventually, at some stage, you won't even need these products because you'll be self-sufficient in the mastery of presenting your natural state moment to moment by keeping your heart open and providing everything your heart ever desired. Till next time, catch you later.